Well, welcome. We've heard from the liberal side, we've heard from the conservative side. Tonight, we talk from the libertarian, kind of the middle side. So why don't we start with introductions?
Okay. Hi, I'm Mike Soares. I am member of the Milford Republican Town Committee. I'm the treasurer there, and I'm a libertarian-leaning Republican.
Hi, Al. I'm Mike Schiavi. I am a Democrat for the most part, although I try to be a pragmatic Democrat. And that is look at the issues and see what makes sense. And I'm on the Finance Committee, obviously, with you folks, and chairman of the school subcommittee meeting. So having some interesting conversations on the school budget.
And we'll get into that in a minute. But, you know, one of the things I take pride in is I have a hard time discerning between a liberal Republican and a conservative Democrat from Massachusetts. It seems like, you know, each side has the uber fringe, which scares me, because anybody who votes dogma, I worry about. But then the vast majority seem to be right in the middle, going, I guess you called it pragmatic, or looking at issues.
Right. Right.
It's funny you mentioned that. Something like 70% of the bills in through the House go through with almost unanimous support. So it's really what we're arguing about is that remaining 30%. It's unfortunate though that the media tends to polarize the public to such extreme extent. You're either red or blue, and there's no in between. And like you mentioned, there's a lot of in between.
So now, well, let's pick a topic that I know you two are perfectly aligned on: gun control.
Sure.
And specifically, there's a lot of press about 3D printed guns. Fact, fiction? Is it a threat?
Well, the fact is that they can print guns with the 3D printers. They can make them. I think that is now becoming more realistic every day. And of course, the thing with 3D guns is they're made of a composite material, and you can't see them in a metal detector, and so it becomes a issue of security on airplanes and other public areas, right? Because you don't know about them. So I think that I've come to the conclusion that that the Constitution allows us to have to bear arms, but within the context of defending your family against threats, not against the federal government. You don't have that right. Some people seem to think that you do. We don't, nor do you have a right to have a private militia. The Constitution doesn't allow you to do that either, but you should have the right to bear arms, to hunt, to go to target practice, and if you think that you need a gun to protect your family from, if you're in some place that seems unsafe, but you certainly don't have the right to bear arms against the local police or the FBI. Anybody who thinks that they have that right needs to read Article 2, Section 8, or Article 3, Section 3, and you'll realize that you don't have that right. So I think that things like 3D printers, which in the hands of the wrong people allow for a multitude of more weapons that can bring harm to the public, is something we need to guard against.
Michael?
So one thing I like to remind people is that it's never been illegal to make homemade weapons. And in the centuries that people have been making homemade weapons, you rarely find any gun crime with homemade weapons, mostly because they're not always very good.
They're inferior?
They're inferior. Mike mentioned that they're made of a plastic composite. Well, there's a reason why modern firearms are made, the barrels at least, are made from a metal material. It's, you have tens of thousands of pounds of pressure when you fire a cartridge. It is almost a sure thing that a plastic barreled weapon would fail after just a few shots. That's why the idea that criminals are going to mass produce plastic weapons that have no metal in them, that can't be detected, and go on these crime rampages, it's just not realistic.
But now, when we look at this, how do you outlaw 3D printers?
Well, I don't think you can't outlaw them. Maybe you can control them. Maybe to Michael's point about whether you can make guns at home anyways, They should still be registered. We should know what the weapons are that the public has to some extent. Again, it's for protection of your family or for target practice or for hunting. It's not to build up a cache of guns to protect against the federal government, which I only bring that up in the matter, of course, because I was in North Carolina a few months ago listening to a radio station down there, and someone came on and said the Second Amendment is so that we can have arms and be ready to fight the federal government.
Militias against the
Yes.
federal government.
Yeah, well, unfortunately, no. That you're an anarchist if you do that, so you don't have that right.
But isn't that the same group that says the war of northern aggression
Yes.
has been paused?
It's paused, right?
Paused.
That they will rise again.
You know, we haven't dealt with the fact it was a civil war.
Right.
It was the war of northern aggression, and
Sure.
kind of like the Korean conflict. It never really ended. It just paused.
That's right. Well, we're going to end that pretty soon, right? We're going to get a
Well,
peace
you know, the
treaty.
problem I have with the whole concept is I remember now that I have a grandson, I would get a trigger guard for my shotgun anyway. And I have it downstairs, tucked away, hidden, so nobody can get to it, but
The trigger guard or the gun?
both. The trigger guard on the gun.
Okay, there you go.
But you know, you think about it, when the law came out that said you have to keep a trigger guard on, I went down to, you know, the sporting goods store and I bought one. And I thought about that and I said, now I wonder how many illicit heroin dealers with illegal guns are behind me buying trigger guards so they don't break that law.
Right.
Yeah, the practicality sometimes doesn't seem like it's taken.
Doesn't mean that the statistics don't tell you that if we control guns to some extent, it doesn't reduce crime. So I think that's what the data is showing. And so that's why I think we have to have some type of control on weapons. Certainly, you know, the AR-15s that we're talking about that are becoming prevalent in these mass murder crimes that we've been seeing.
So I always say you control the people who have firearms, you don't control the firearms they have. If I can't trust you with my AR-15, I do not trust you with my BB gun. It's that simple. It's a responsibility. The safety rules are the same. You don't point it at something you're not willing to destroy. You know, you always treat it as if it's loaded. Those are like basic safety rules that if you cannot manage, you don't deserve a
Michael,
BB gun.
I'm in a different place though, but BB gun compared to AR-15, to me, no. But if I outlaw the AR-15, well, somebody's going to come out with a different version that has the same firepower.
Well, there's nothing about the AR-15 that is more powerful. It's actually one of the weaker rifles on the market. You go to any sporting goods store and you get a 306 or any sort of deer hunting rifle, if you will. You know, you're comparing you know, a 22 caliber bullet with a 30 caliber bullet. It's totally different, and there's nothing more powerful about the weapon. That's just a misconception. It's been popularized through the media and everything else.
But see, I have no problem if I want to buy a gun at the gun show next week, going to Tom or you know, his gun control person at the police station and signing up and letting them do their due diligence and check me out. I'm not hiding anything. I do have a problem with somebody saying, I got to buy a gun right now. Okay, why? Why is it you have to buy a gun this moment?
Well, why do you need something that's more than a single shot weapon anyway?
Oh, come on.
That's kind of what we're talking about.
Because
here,
not
aren't we?
everyone's a sniper marksman, and not everybody you know, is in a situation where they're defending themselves against one person.
Well, at that point, you're hoping that you're really only defending yourself for a short period of time until the police come.
And I
up.
mean, from a hunting point of view, my favorite was, you know, my 8mm Mauser. And I remember when I used to go hunting up north, I had 6 rounds, because that was
Right.
3 times more than I'd ever shoot. Well, I shouldn't say that. One or two to sight in, but I don't think I ever took more than 3 shots. So the bolt action
Right.
was plenty. But again,
Or even a Winchester repeating rifle, something like that is fine. But, you know, in the right context, of course, in Massachusetts, you can only really shoot only with a shotgun.
I was going to
anyway.
say, we're in Massachusetts, except on a range, can you shoot a rifle?
You can't, right, only a shotgun. Right.
So,
Protect that guy, that woman that's in her bathroom, you know, 2 houses down.
Well, I
from
mean,
the
that's a
party.
scary movie if you're
Sure.
letting loose a rifle round.
Yeah.
And the houses are side by each.
Yes.
Right. So to Mike's point, there was recently a video, mother and daughter own a convenience store. They're getting robbed. They actually had 6-round revolvers, or the mom had a revolver and the daughter had a semi-automatic. They shot the guy 6 times. He was still attacking her. But so I mean, why do you need more than one a weapon that fires 1 round? Because sometimes it takes more than 1 round to take down somebody to get him to
I guess
stop
1 round can do as much damage in the right area as 6.
in the wrong parts.
Right.
Yeah, and if you're not,
But
you know,
I have a hard time, like you say, there's such misconceptions about the Second Amendment. It is not set up to allow a terrorist organization to fight the feds. You know, it makes no
Even
sense.
homegrown organizations to fight. the
I don't
feds.
care where they're from.
Yeah,
You know, McVeigh was certainly not a foreigner.
no, homegrown.
You know, and you
Right.
sit there and say, okay, you know, when people pick on certain groups, I sit there and say, my God, this guy was, quote, a Christian. I don't find myself aligned with almost anything he did. And I'm a Christian.
Right. You need to read the Second Amendment in context with the Constitution itself. That's really how it needs to be read.
But now, developing a single shot pistol,
Well, a pistol revolver, but we're talking about a magazine and a rifle, right? That's really the danger that we've been seeing more frequently lately.
but now, Michael, they say, okay, I'm going to do away with 30 round. I don't know what the heck you'd ever do with a 30 round.
Stand at the window of a Las Vegas hotel, and,
Right.
right?
Or a 50 round, you know, on the old Thompson 45s, you have 50 round magazine. The carrying that much weight alone would annoy me, but you sit there and say, well, okay, so I put 3 clips in my pocket. If I want to cause damage, I put 3 clips. Now, I remember back, oh God, when we were kids, that if you added a firearm to any crime, you got at least a year put away. And we did away with that because we said it's not fair.
no, it's still in the books. They just don't enforce it. They plead down, and that's part of the problem. Actually, the Gun Owners Action League of Massachusetts, has started a new social media campaign of mass court fails, where repeat offenders, offenders of gun crimes,
Right.
who commit crimes 6 months later because they were released because prosecutors decided, well, it'd be easier just to get a plea deal and just drop the gun charge and just do the drug charge because it's only 6 months. But then those violent offenders are back on the street in 6 months. So the problem isn't that we have too many guns, is that we don't enforce the gun laws we have.
Well, I mean, Chicago's got some of the toughest gun laws in the country.
Exactly.
It also has some of the highest gun crimes.
It has the highest gun homicide rate of any city in America.
Now, the old English justice system, go buy an island, put them on the island. I'm sorry, it's kind of draconian, but where do you finally draw the line? You know, and I'm not happy about the Florida law that says if I think you're threatening me, I can shoot you.
Right.
That seems like the uber, far left or far right, whatever way you want to look at it, craziness that, okay, Michael, you scare me, so I'll just shoot you.
It's complex issues, crises, and there's no easy answers. I mean, the community needs to have pride of place, right? The community needs to want to have its community secure. That's really where I think everything begins. And then crime will kind of dissolve itself if you have people that are ready to enforce laws and demand that the laws are enforced. I absolutely agree that if we have laws on the books, they should be enforced. If you have people that are committing crimes with guns, then that should be a red flag that this shouldn't be, dealt with minor plea
Yeah,
bargains.
pleading down and putting somebody who committed a violent crime back on the street,
Yeah.
they'll never use a gun again, will they?
Well, and that's the problem,
That's
right?
the
And then
problem.
one of them killed the police officer,
Right.
So it's a serious problem, and we need to make sure that we enforce our laws that are on the books for violent offenders.
And I'm not one to go and swing the pendulum. I mean, anybody who's been to Riyadh in the afternoon and gone to Chop Chop Square, you can't help but that's an image I will never forget, where, somebody who stole, put a little rope, pull your hand away from your wrist, and then you sit there and say, okay, to rob a gas station, I'm going to get $300. How much is my hand worth?
Right.
So there are, what was it in Singapore? Luckily, I never saw it, but I read that, a kid who painted graffiti got 40 whacks of a cane. That seems awful extreme.
It seems draconian to us, but I mean, it gets people to comply with the laws.
Well, yeah, I don't know that I'd be tagging any building if I thought I was going to catch a cane, bend over, here comes the cane across your back. I think I'd be a little leery. But you talk about protecting. Immigration keeps becoming a hot topic.
They'll never end. It's been a hot topic since I can remember.
But is there a solution?
I think we've been trying to deal with it as a country for a long time in two different ways. We've been, at some point, trying to influence the countries that these immigrants are coming from. Why are they coming from these countries? What can we do to make those countries better? We've failed miserably in our foreign policy over the years to try to do that.
But is it our place, Michael?
Nation building?
I'm thinking, Bush 1 told Iraqis, get out of Kuwait. It's just not cool to invade the country of Kuwait. And he pushed them back and hit the Iraqi border and said, okay, we're done. All of a sudden now, the second time we went in, we decided that we're going to make them be like us.
Well, we went in for a whole different set of reasons the second time. But you can go back further than that. You can go back to the Reagan administration when he armed the Contras to try to Nicaragua and solve the Central America issue, right? That's really what most of our crisis is. Well, I don't know if it is.
Do we have the right to go to a different country and try and change them?
Well, the only reason why we built the Panama Canal was because Teddy Roosevelt went in and set up, a country that wasn't really there in order to do that. You can go back to United Fruit, who set up these countries so that so that we could have banana republics.
Banana republics.
So that they could bring the bananas into Wellfleet and Cape Cod and set up that whole company in that industry. So have we influenced countries over the past? Of course we have. The idea is that are we more enlightened now? Can we solve these problems that bring these crises that make these folks come up on trains and to get through Mexico to the United States? Can we solve that problem before they get? Why would somebody want to leave their homeland? Isn't that really what we're trying to solve here? Or do we just bring everybody in?
You got Venezuela.
But we can't afford it anymore.
Well, at one point, one of the most affluent countries in the area because of the oil reserves. Now I read that the Bolivar, they're taking 5 zeros off their currency, and I got to admit, I can't even get my hands around the idea of 1,000,000% inflation.
Yeah.
What does that even mean?
And they're increasing the minimum wage by 30 times. So
yeah, but if the value of your money is going down 1,000,000% a year, it's a mere 100,000% this month.
It's a mess, and the sad part is that the average American hasn't really heard about what's going on there, and that's it's actually on our side of the globe. It's in the Americas. It's to the point where our president has actually considered whether or not we need to, for lack of a better word, invade and take control over that country, because it is seriously coming apart, and it's not one of the largest oil reserves, but the largest single reserve in the world. So,
but let me ask both of you, would you care what the reason was if some country invaded New Hampshire?
Well, we defend our country, so of course you're not going to let that happen.
But again, that's my problem. When we go in and you say, should we invade and change the country?
Yeah.
I don't know that I would really care why you invaded New Hampshire till I got you out.
Well, and that's kind of probably one of, or the reason why we haven't done anything with Venezuela is because we're waiting for the people to ask for the U.S.'s help. Because I mean, you're on the brink of civil war in Venezuela. There's been
People are starving.
The average Venezuelan has lost 22 pounds, not because they're on a weight loss program, but because they are starving. There have been attempted assassinations on their president. And they're really struggling. There are something like 3 million refugees in Colombia right now. In Colombia, of all,
Right.
It's not that great a country, but it's
But do we
so much
have
better
the
than
right to go in there and say we know better?
Well, the Organization of American States is supposed to be this smaller United Nations, right, to deal with the countries in this hemisphere, as Michael said, right, the Americas, and try to solve problems within them. It's failing because I don't think we pay enough attention to it. I think we need to strengthen that organization and understand, of course, we're the big guys on the block, but what is the consensus of the hemisphere altogether?
Your son has put his life at risk defending our country. Would you feel comfortable sending him into Venezuela to defend their rights?
Well, again, it's about the policy of what do we do as a country? What serves our best interests as a country, right? And if our best interests, President Reagan sent the troops into Grenada, right? So we have President Kennedy was ready to send him into Cuba. Eisenhower certainly wanted to. And so these are the questions, and we need to know what makes sense for the health and the strategic importance of the United States. And if it's for a democratic hemisphere, I don't know. I guess we'd have to know that the reason why we're doing anything, the last thing a president should do is send anybody into war, right? But I mean,
if there's any option.
Right, but and we should have diplomacy trying to solve problems. So these are hard questions, but you can't ignore countries in our own hemisphere that are struggling. And what can we do short of that to change that?
And that's the part I'm struggling with. It all sounds great till they say, baby Schiavi, go get in harm's way. Well, is that really threatening our country? I don't see how.
Well, if you have 1 million refugees at our border, does that?
Yeah, so that's one threat. The other threat, if it destabilizes the oil markets, because we are still our economy is still very much dependent on oil.
Oh,
and
it will be for a long time.
For a very long time, it will be. And until that changes, Venezuela is a very large piece of that market. So if they destabilize the oil market, it might be in America's best interest to maybe form a coalition with other South American countries and say, well, look, we're going to take over this country.
Don't we always form coalitions and we do 90% of the heavy lifting and everybody else chips in? Okay, I'll send you Joe and Juan and Miguel. Okay, here's our 3.
Yeah. Well, with a different president, maybe, who knows, maybe everyone will pay their fair share.
With a different president?
With our current president, I'm saying
I was going to say.
a different president from our past coalition presidents.
It's kind of an interesting way of looking at things, though, because while we always complain that we always bear the most brunt, how would we feel in a subservient role?
Well, that's always going to be the issue.
Mm-hmm.
You sit there and say, let's look at the Road and Belt or Belt and Road Initiative by China.
Mm-hmm.
Does anybody really believe that's not self-serving? When you've got countries where they mortgaged billions of dollars.
Yes, I was reading an article today about Indonesia and
the port,
yes.
where all of a sudden China came in and said, we'd like access.
Mm-hmm.
And they said, we're not real comfortable with you having military presence in our country. Okay, pay back the bill.
Right.
We loaned you $3 billion. Just pay it back. It's on demand. I'm demanding. And now all of a sudden they got to shut up and live with what China wants.
That's part of the biggest problems of being subject to your debt holders, right? And that's America is now, I don't know, 21, 22 trillion in debt. At what point does China do that to us? You know?
The only thing I think, when you read back over too big to fail, if China really did say, we're not buying any more of your debt, we're going to crash your economy.
It goes around in a circle, unfortunately.
I was going to say, okay, so you can take all the money out of my pockets. I can't buy any of your goods. Okay, what does that do to your economy?
Mhm.
Well, and that's why there's some economists that say, China's pretty much pulled all their triggers as far as any sort of retaliation to Trump's
mean tariffs?
tariffs. So, we pulled the trigger on 10% of their economy. They pulled it on ours, and maybe in dollar numbers, it's a better example where it's 50 billion each way. Well, we only we're only so much of our economy reliant on Chinese goods when they're so much dependent on American consumers.
Well, I was reading, and I got a kick out of it, saying, okay, China is running out of items to tariff.
Yeah.
I mean, they've got such a huge surplus with us that all of a sudden they're like, okay, let's increase tariff on.
What do we import?
We're already, no more Harleys. Okay, so you made the point. No more this. No
more
God,
cars.
we're out of.
Right. Or airplane parts.
Yeah, we're out of items that we can tax or tariff.
Yep.
Now, do tariffs work in your mind?
Probably not to the extent that we think they should. What the president is trying to do is reverse policies of the past 30 years, which allowed American businesses to set up companies in China. 30, 40 years now, I think we're talking about here. And that's what he's trying to reverse with tariffs. It's a hard road to hold going down there and seeing that will work. I'm not sure it can work. But it's a good message to make. But he should be making that message to the American industries that set up the companies in China. That's really what I think he's trying to focus on. To that, I applaud him because it's been time to do that.
It really depends on what your goal is with these tariffs. If you're trying to make an economic impact, I think it's less effective than some other means. But if you're trying to send a message, I think it speaks volumes. And the message is, look, America's not going to just bend over and fold anymore. You're either going to play by the rules. The Chinese markets, Chinese companies have been known for corporate espionage. There's no privacy in any of our copyrights and patents,
property,
intellectual property.
Yeah, the whole IP issue.
Yeah, it's a real big issue because all of a sudden, Apple sends their iPhones to be built in China. Next thing you know, a Chinese company comes out with, the China phone, and it's almost identical to the iPhone.
We had that where our distributor for 8 years sold our products, environmental water testing products. And then all of a sudden, they said, okay, we're no longer going to represent you. That's strange. No, they had copied.
Yeah.
By being our distributor and learning our services and, learning everything, they back engineered and came out with almost exact duplicates of everything we had.
Right. So, it's that sort of like if we're going to be partners, we're going to be trade partners, you're going to have to play by the rules.
And who defines the rules?
The trade agreements. I mean, we're two sovereign nations. We make trade agreements that they're supposed to respect our intellectual property, and if they don't, the country is supposed to enforce that through their own policies.
And obviously,
and
if you look at how many purses are sold in Battery Park, not $300, $800, but $30.
Yeah.
How many DVDs were copied? They're not playing by the rules. So now what do you do?
Well, yeah, that's the whole thing. What does the trade agreement say? What is the recourse when something is violated? So you go to court, you go to an international court, and that company is supposed to be heavily fined, to the point that really they can't sell that product anymore. That's what we need to start enforcing, right?
But then you run into the whole issue of, okay, China, you're going to help us, but we need your help on policies with North Korea. Okay, you're not playing fair by the IP rules, but if I want your help in keeping North Korea, how do you balance it?
Well, that's why it really is a tightrope, because we do need them to influence North Korea. I think that's one of the reasons why we've gotten so far in the last 12 months with North Korea, is because of China's help prior to this developing trade war. And until you put the pressure on North Korea's economy, they're not going to cooperate. It's just that simple. So it is a challenge to balance those two competing interests, but that's why we elect very smart
Do you
people
think
to do so.
the countries
Okay.
like North Korea now, for the first time, really wonder how far they can push a man like Trump?
Say that one more time.
In the past, I think of Syria and the red line.
Mm.
If you cross it,
Mm.
oh, you crossed it. Okay, here's another one. Please don't do that anymore. And it seems like, right, wrong, or indifferent, Trump has made progress in areas that we never were able to get progress. Is it because nobody can understand what he'll do, or what do you think the reason
Well,
is?
where is the progress he's made? With North Korea, we're almost exactly where we were in 2012 with North Korea. We had come down that same path. The question now is, what will we give on that table to make North Korea live up to what they said in this meeting that they just had, right? So they want an end to the Korean War.
Yeah, what's that? Who cares? I mean, am I missing something?
Well, the South Koreans want to have more alignment with North Korea. So they want an end to the Korean War.
Okay.
But what does that mean? Does that mean that the American troops leave South Korea? Do we then lose bargaining power in the region if we don't have the military presence there? Is it better for our interests? Will they demilitarize? Will they give up their nuclear weapons if we agree that the Korea War is over?
But if we agree the war is over, and we pull all our troops out, does it change anything?
But just because we agree that the war is over, well, we agreed that the war in Germany was over. We didn't take our troops out of Germany. So,
No, but I'm just trying to
If
understand.
anything, we should take our troops out of Germany first.
Well, we got, what, 30, 50,000 troops?
in South
Yeah,
Korea,
something
like
it's about
that.
30,000.
Okay, 30,000.
Yeah. Plus exercises that we hold with the South Koreans.
But 30,000 troops would not stop any part of the North Korean army.
No, and that's why the base in Guam is so vital, is that it would immediately provide heavy air support.
But if we didn't
anything
have
ever
our
happened.
troops and they invaded, what's the difference?
Well, the difference is you've got 30,000 American troops there, and if they invade and put the American troops in harm, then they are directly attacking the United States. That's
Exactly.
the difference, right? If you take the troops out and they just swarm into South Korea, just like if China was to invade Taiwan, it's the same thing. You've crossed a bridge.
It's not our family
Right.
that, because, I sit there and say 30,000 troops aren't going to stop anything.
The fact that they're there stops them.
Yeah, it's essentially putting America as a buffer between North and South Korea. You can't attack South Korea without affecting those 30,000 troops there, and as a to secure those 30,000 troops, we're going to take action and defend the country of South Korea to make sure that our troops are
But now,
safe.
couldn't you do the same thing if you have somebody who I believe will live up to his threats? And you say, okay, hey, North Korea, if you haven't noticed, you're on a peninsula. Peninsula is surrounded by water. Water hides submarines. If you cross this line, dear world, I don't care what you think. I'm going to end it as quickly as you started it. But I don't have to put 30,000 American boys and girls as fodder in the middle.
Well, you're introducing something I'm not sure, even whether it's a libertarian or a Republican or a Democrat, wants to know that the United States is prepared to launch nuclear weapons to stop a conflict. That's what you're asking, right?
Well, you have to know that the U.S. is always prepared to do that. they're going to use it as an action of last resort. But people and countries need to know that
Let me ask you a
America
question.
is ready to do that if needed.
North Korea launches a nuke and takes out Los Angeles. And they say to us, we shouldn't have done that. If you don't launch against us, we won't launch any more. And we'll save a few million Americans.
I don't think that missile gets 30 minutes into the air before all our missiles launch. I mean, with all our technology, there's no way that there isn't a retaliatory strike, because these things happen so quickly as soon as that launch is detected.
Well, that regime cannot exist. We just wouldn't let that regime exist anymore. Whether or not we would destroy the country
Now, do
is
you
a different
kill?
story.
Well, when I say we'll stop it, you take out every military base, everything, but you're going to kill millions of innocent North Koreans.
Yep.
Do you have the guts to push the button?
Well, I mean, we've already destroyed regimes that were threats to the United States. We did that in 2001, right after 9/11. We went in and told the Taliban, either you give us Osama bin Laden, or you're out of the government, and they didn't, and we did. And so we would do that again. The whole thing in Iraq is a different story about why we really went in there or not, but we did take out Saddam Hussein, and it didn't last 15 minutes, and so we would probably do the same thing. But the idea is that we're trying to have a diplomatic solution. I think Kim Jong-un realizes that his economy, his domestic policies are failing, even though his military is getting better, and they're making strides in rocketry and nuclear weapons. But I think they have a power plant that's 17 years into the making that he just visited.
Michael, I can
So
practice.
he needs our technology.
I can train. I can practice boxing. And I'm 3 times better than I've ever been. And they say, you want to fight Mike Tyson? I don't know I'll ever get to a point where I could fight a professional boxer. And I feel North Korea is kind of the same way. They can get stronger militarily.
But they took a poll of North Koreans, whether or not they were answering truthfully or not. They actually, if you had a war with the United States, would you win? Oh yeah, of course we'd win. So you might have that mindset in that country. The question is, I think the leadership wants to make the country better. So I think he's trying to do that, and if he can get American technology, he'll do it. I think that's why he'll barter an agreement with America outside of his Chinese influences. If we take some certain steps, Mike Pompeo is over there trying to do that now. So
But didn't we do that before, where we lifted some sanctions and?
I think we want more than that now, though, right? And they want more than that. I think he wants to bring his country in. If he comes to the United Nations in the fall and speaks in front of the General Assembly, I think might see a change in North Korea. Maybe we're being naive. We've been naive before.
Why do you think he's coming now talking about change?
Because I don't think he can rule his country with an iron fist any longer. I think
I
that's
think-
probably the reason.
I think
I
part
think
of
time
me,
is running out on the North Korean economy.
part of me believes he's finally realized that I can't go on because my people are starving, and there's no way to sneak around it.
Right.
China is just not going to keep sliding me enough.
Yeah.
I mean, at least at this point, China for years kept them, not quite underwater, but not comfortable. And I mean, China's got the biggest risk, because if the economy really did come apart, where are all those North Koreans going to go? They're going to run over the border to China.
Yeah.
The same thing, we start talking about the wall. Well, are we going to build a wall?
On the Canadian border?
Well, you mentioned that. That's actually one of the. It's become the second most well, obviously, but it's become almost just as problematic as the southern border, because flights from Mexico to Canada are pretty much not that they're unrestricted, but it's very easy to get a visa to Canada, and then they just slip over the northern Canadian border.
Yeah, but wait a minute. Okay, help me understand this, because my understanding is the people sliding in from Mexico to Arizona, these are not affluent people.
They're not
These
getting on planes.
I mean, how do they whip down their credit card
No, I don't think so.
and buy a ticket to Canada?
No, that's what they've been doing. They're buying tickets to Canada and slipping through the north border with Canada, because it's easier to get through than the our southern border.
Okay, that's news to me because
It was news to me just last week.
You know, I look at the kind of people they're highlighting on the southern border, and again, I may be naive, but it seems like desperate people.
Desperate people,
And I mean,
unfortunately.
if you couldn't feed Jillian, what would you do?
You find a way to do it.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I don't know. If I could not feed my daughters or keep them safe, what would you do? I don't know. I have to admit, I don't know what I would
Right.
do, but allowing them to starve to death or get shot is probably not my first option.
I mean, the long-term solution has got to be some type of diplomatic relation with Mexico to help improve their country, whichever way we can, whether it's just through allowing more U.S. businesses to do business there, improve security, or even working on our own policies here in the U.S. One of the major sources of income for the drug cartels is selling drugs to Americans.
Mm?
So if we can figure out a way to stop the money from funneling down, perhaps through legalization of marijuana,
But if I'm the Mexican government and you're yapping at me, can't I say, Michael, stop the demand? You don't have to worry about the supply. If you stop the demand in your family,
Yeah.
my family will stop the supply because we'll have no customers.
Right. So, that's one of the reasons why.
Pretty hard to do, I think, Al.
Well, no, I understand, but it's like, when you think of years ago, how much money was going into organized crime through bookies, playing the numbers. All of a sudden, one of the biggest benefits I saw with the lottery is 90% of that revenue dried up.
Yeah.
There's still a little bit, people don't want to pay taxes, whatever. When I think of the marijuana initiatives, one of the big benefits I love is taking that money away from the cartels.
Yeah, it's one of the reasons why I'm a big supporter of legalization of marijuana nationwide. And actually, just today, I heard on the news that our president is considering presenting some type of bill to Congress, or asking Congress to remove marijuana from Schedule A. Either that, or through the Attorney General, going back to the Eric Holder decree, which basically said that if your state legalized marijuana, the feds are not going to interfere with that.
But now, I get a kick out of Colorado. No major bank will work with you, even though legally you're selling marijuana. They're just not going to do it because it still violates federal law.
Exactly.
And you sit there and say, seriously?
No, but it's a big issue.
Now you've got Brinks trucks showing up at all sorts of different hours because the bad people know that there's millions of dollars of cash.
Right.
And, they won't attack that place because that's against the law. I don't get it.
No, it's difficult. I think that we need a ruling probably from the Supreme Court regarding the marijuana laws, and letting it be a state decision and getting rid of the federal laws.
Now, as we start looking at state and local issues, let's jump to the center of the universe. Self-service gas stations,
Yeah.
they're dangerous, I guess.
They're actually safer than full service because the fire suppression systems are a lot more advanced and safer technology-wise than full-serve stations.
Now, Michael, that seems far-reaching to me. If I say all gas stations have to have state-of-the-art fire suppression.
No, only self-service stations have to have a higher degree.
But why?
Because you're not having a professional put the gas in your vehicle.
And when was the last time you filled your tank? And you're telling me that these high school kids are professionals?
Well, when I ride my motorcycle, and I'm certainly not letting anybody else put gasoline in it, so that's not the case.
I understand the old days. We had multiple gas stations in Milford that were single island, old Milford families, and we didn't want to put them out of business. by making them compete with full, mini. It's not even full service anymore. I mean, last time I looked, we were joking about the Texaco commercial.
Right. Men from Texaco.
Yeah,
With-
see,
yeah.
he
Yeah,
remembers.
yeah,
The
He's too
Texaco
young.
Star,
You can trust your car with the man who wears the star. And
or the finest service. that
yeah, and the
takes
three
you-
guys would run out. One would check your tire pressure. One would check your oil. One would wash your windshield.
which-
I haven't seen that in many, many
No.
years.
Never heard of it.
So they came out with mini service, which was what we have, saying basically they'll come and they'll pump your gas.
Yep.
But, I mean, there's 300 odd stations, 300 odd towns in Massachusetts.
351.
And how many don't allow, how many do the New Jersey rule of no
Only a
self-serve?
handful.
I'm just curious, can anybody think of a reason we shouldn't have it?
No, there's not going to be proliferation of gas stations because we changed to self-service gas stations. You're worried about the folks that can't pump their own gas. I think there's still a requirement that they have to come out and pump your gas if you need some help. So I think it's time to probably retire that.
And that's the one legitimate, sorry, but I could see them saying, look, if somebody's handicapped,
Mm-hmm.
and they can't get out of their car, okay, put a button on there that says, I need help.
Yes. And
See, I would go a step further and say, regardless of your handicap or not, if Milford's going to do this, we should do it gradually. I think it'd have a better chance of passing a town meeting if we said, look, for every full serve station or mini serve station, you can have one self-serve station. So that way you get the best.
So half and half?
Half and half. So that way you get the best of both worlds. If it's cold or you simply don't like to pump your own gas, you can go to the full serve island. And if you're in a rush and you like to do your own gas or whatever the case may be, you want self-serve, you can go to that lane.
But now, Michael the Libertarian is saying government should reach in and
No,
dictate the market?
I'm saying that the government is already have their hands in the pocket. And whether I like it or not, that's the law. If it's going to pass, and I want it to pass, I think it would have a better chance at passing if you had this a little bit of a compromise where it's.
But I'd like to know what who are we compromising with? In the old days, protect some Milford families. Okay, I'll buy that.
they're all big gas stations now. So
Yeah,
But
I mean,
how many single island gas stations are left in Milford?
there's one on Main Street across from the Dunkin' Donuts, right? I think that's about it.
There was
Oh yeah, I forgot about that one.
Yeah.
Milford Daily News had a poll. What do you want, self-serve or full-serve stations in town? And the majority said they wanted to keep it full-serve. So at least according to that poll, which is of course unscientific, but it's a social media poll, it's going to be a tough battle to get
So
self-service.
you think it's going to be this year's chicken debate?
It is definitely going to be a long debate.
But I think of when I'm heading up to Holy Cross, I'm in Upton.
Mm-hmm.
There's two gas stations side by each. One, the little old guy comes out, pumps my gas, and if I want to save a few pennies, I go across the street to the one that doesn't.
Mm-hmm.
If to me, the market will dictate. Because let's say we went all self-serve, and Schiavi Brothers turn around and say, I think there's a market for mini-serve, so I'm going to offer that. Well, if enough people go to Schiavi gas station,
Mm-hmm.
it will thrive.
Yeah.
And then somebody else will, the Suarez family will say, hey, I can make money at that too. I got a hard time trying to say that's what we used to do, so we should continue doing it, because I don't understand what the issue is.
No. Convenience, because people want to just get the gas and go to something they're doing. It's busy. There's no time to do any of this stuff anymore. So people want to just pump their own gas and get going, or plug their car in and charge it. I don't know what's going to happen in the next 15 years, but whatever. It's time to progress. Whatever progress is, however we define it, self-service seems to be a part of it. So.
And again, to me, it's let the market decide. If I'm only offering self-serve and everybody loves mini-serve and nobody buys gas from me, I'll change. Another seems like hot topic coming. You all have heard from people calling the finance committee saying, we ought to increase school spending by millions of dollars. That way we get a level 1 school. You got other groups saying, we've got a level 3 school, you ought to cut $3 to $5 million out of their budget. And you both have been involved in the school subcommittees.
And we are right now intimately involved with it, trying to get more transparency as to how the schools are doing, what our funding is going towards, how the progress is translating into better schools, however we're going to define better schools. Are we defining better schools by just test scores? Are we defining better schools by the mix of the student population, by the condition of the schools, by the curriculum of the schools? It's a complex question, and draconian cuts, because test scores have come back and said that Milford students are not on par with other schools from other communities, is a drastic change.
But is that what the test scores are saying?
I don't know if they're saying that. I think we probably should discuss what the scores are saying.
A number of times I brought up when my ungrateful offspring number 1 hit middle school. Now, Tommy Davern nobody had the same pride I've ever seen.
I agree.
Middle school East was Tommy's.
And my kids went through there with him too, absolutely.
And I was always amazed and appreciative of his emotion and what he took care of. And I remember when I was on the school council, I went to him and I said, Tommy, why do your MCAS scores suck? Figuring I get a reaction. And boy, did I ever. Because I'm hitting him at the core. You know, I mean, the implication is you're not doing as much for your kids. And that I knew would get a visceral reaction.
Right.
And he came back and said, because you're ignorant. And I said, oh, good, enlighten me. And he showed me that Milford had a very bimodal distribution of scores. The top kids, and he said, I'll put my top kids up against any school system around us. But we also have an entire group of kids who we've got 30% or whatever the number was back then, who are just learning the English language, who are coming to Milford with 1 year of formal school. And you throw them into the 8th grade testing, and now when you average the two, we look subpar.
But the argument on the other side is saying, well, you're basically saying you can't teach these kids now, so why should we give you any more money? You basically have consented to the idea that they're unteachable. You can't make them have better scores.
If I cut $3 to $5 million out of your budget, you're subcommittee chair. If you went in and you could wave the wand and you took 62 million down to 57, what would happen?
I think that you'll see things degrade even worse, right? But does that mean that the argument the other way works too? If I give you a blank check?
If I took 62 to 67, would I get a class 1 school next year?
So the question has been not necessarily do we cut the school budget. I have never supported cutting the school budget. What we have seen is a school budget that is continuously asking for 5 to 6% annual increases, and quite frankly, it's not sustainable. You know, we see that from time to time with a budget here and there. We just had that with police last year, where it went up 6%. But that is a one-time event usually. The problem is the school has been consistently doing this year in year out, to the point where, you know, not only the vast majority of the town budget, something like 60-something cents on every dollar, is just
62 cents of the dollar.
Yeah.
And more than 88% of the budget is salaries. So 62% of the town's budget is going to the schools. Over 80% of the school's budget is salaries.
Right. And we also see a staff per student ratio that's dropping. So in other words, we have more staff per student than our surrounding towns. So the question is, you know, why do we have so much staff if we're not getting the results? And the answers we've been getting is because we have these students with challenges, right? And so then that's appropriate, but we've got to make sure that it falls in line with our growth targets.
My problem is I want to understand it. You know, my hat's off to you saying transparency. Okay, when we look at it years ago, when I first was on the school budget committee, we're going through the book. How many rolls of toilet paper do we need at Woodland? It's like, seriously.
That's not where
I
we
mean,
need to be
this is
focusing.
nuts.
Mhm.
But I look and I say, okay, I don't understand. Because our top kids are getting into some pretty impressive schools.
Absolutely. Mhm.
So that tells me, I mean, I like Kevin and all the school committee, and God bless them, but they're jaundiced. Their view is never going to be neutral.
Right.
Their
What-
job is to advocate for the kids.
Right.
Right.
What,
The real judge to me is, do the kids get into the schools they apply, and do they do well when they get there?
well, even more than that, Al, the whole school choice in and out is the question at the core here. And I think my understanding from a couple of years ago was that these decisions are made at these early elementary school grades.
Yes.
Well, now we have something that should change that dynamic. We have a brand new $62 million elementary school that's state-of-the-art, beautiful, great environment, and my goal is to keep it that way, keep it beautiful. Parents and the way a school feels is important just as much as the curriculum. If they're not cutting the grass or the roses aren't growing on the bushes, we have to make sure everything is right, the mechanics of the school are fine. So this should change the dynamics. When parents bring their kids into this school, they should say, this is where I want my kids to learn how to read and write and move forward. And then we don't have that degradation of the population. That should change the dynamic. And then we should see improvements.
So do we swing the pendulum in the meantime?
Well, in what regards? In
Drastic increase, drastic reduction.
well, I think to the point that we've invested in a school, it's outside of the operating budget, but it has affected the operating budget, and we have made that
I
investment.
mean,
in there.
realistically, we fund health care separately. So when you talk about the school's been hitting 6%, yeah, because the health budget goes up. We fund the mortgages, the bonds. I mean, if you really looked at what the school budget went up when Woodland came online,
Exactly
Sure,
right.
right?
Huge increase.
And we fund ELL and SPED separately.
We do, right.
And then we turn around and say 2 point something on your operating funds.
Mhm.
Does it seem outrageous?
That part
No,
is,
but
but then
they've been
again,
going higher than that. That's the problem.
then we had a union contract that got negotiated, of which is brought to us, and that's what we decided to incorporate into the operating budgets and keep everything where it is. We don't, to your point you've made before, Al, you've got X amount of dollars, I don't care how many teachers you have.
It's up to you.
Right, it's up to you, but what we've realized is that this is the level we want to have in order to teach the kids in Milford.
It'll be interesting come town meeting, and stay tuned to our 6 loyal viewers. I appreciate you listening to us. If you're still on, if we haven't bored you too much,
Never.
hopefully you see a moderate view, a pragmatic view, because I've always said the people on the far left scare me as much as the people on the far right. If you're voting dogma, you're scary. If you're looking at the issues saying, I don't care if it's Republican or Democrat party that leads it, what's good for the center of the universe is what I should vote for, then I feel comfortable. And as always, may God bless to our 6 loyal viewers, and may tomorrow be a healthier night than tonight. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
We're free. You get the issue of Trump's the devil,
God.
right? God Almighty.
Is that what they're called, the Bartels? That's crazy.
But you know, it's funny.